Good morning, everybody. My name is Samantha Mirabal. I'm with Melco's application team. I hope my voice is not too soft. I've been sick all week. Anyway, my name is Samantha Mirabal. I'm here to do our DesignShop Talk this week. See what questions you might have. I know I've been out for a few weeks, so let's see what we have. And if you have questions while we're live, please type them in on the comments. Good morning, Susan. And I will see what questions come in. If you see me looking off to the side, that's what I'm doing. I have another monitor set up over here where I can keep track of what comes in while we're live. All right, so I'm going to start with, good morning, Scott. I'll start off with what was sent in ahead of time. So let's go there. Oops. Sorry, give me one sec. How do I make, there it is. No, I don't want to do that. Ugh. Knock it off. I just want to swap. All right, I quit. I'm just going to do it this way. Unless it's going to cooperate this time. Try one more time. There it goes. I want to swap. There we are. Okay, let me get my feeds back up where I can see them. What just happened? Did the video really go away? Or is that just my... Yes, it did go away. One moment. All right. Well, sorry about that. Is it all fixed? Can you guys see my DesignShop screen and me? I hope so. If so, let me know. And yeah. All right. Okay, Scott says we're good. Excellent. All right, so let's get started. Thank you guys. All right, so how do you export the appliqué cut files to a cutter or a laser when using DS Letterman and Greek appliqué fonts? Okay, so first let's go type something. Greek. That one. Let's do a tilde. I like triangles. All right, so I've got a font here. It's the Greek Letterman. I'm going to center it. First thing I would suggest you doing is do whatever you are going to do with this as far as setting up your underlay, your top stitching densities. I would suggest doing that first. All right. Once you're happy with it, and now you're just trying to finalize everything to send to your cutter, to get the files and all that, then what you're going to want to do is take this lettering and get it out of a lettering format. Put it into, where you have all the wireframes. All right. So if I go right click on it, operations, convert to wireframe, you notice all that does is take it out of the lettering format, but it's all still the same. This first color, if you turn that on, that is the actual shape of what you're laying down your fabric and cutting around. Excuse me. So what you're going to do is, or what I do anyway, is I take this one color, Control C. You can also edit, copy. Okay. Create a new file, paste. Why do I do that? Just so I don't have everything else and I know I'm only working with the one thing. File, save as. Go change this to an SVG. And save it off. All right. Now you have your SVG. You can go over to your whatever software you use for your cut program and load up your SVG, and you're good to go to cut it out. All right. And that will give you that shape to cut. All right. What else? Let's see if there... Nope. I want this one. All right. So then... Not on this one, no. If you look at this one, it's already really close to the edge. So so the question there, someone typed in on YouTube. So on YouTube, you don't bump up the size. Let me give a more detailed answer to that. It depends on what you're using to cut out your material. Lasers have a kerf, which is, a laser has a thickness to the light that is cutting. So when it cuts, it burns away material. Each laser is different. You have to find that out from your manufacturer. Mine has a few points, so I end up adding 6 points. So I offset the border by about 6 points. But that is very dependent on the technology you're using for cutting. So, and again, not only that, but your manufacturer's, how wide that kerf is, they call it. So yes, you can if you're using a laser to cut it. If you're using a fabric cutter, and what I mean by fabric cutter, like a Graphtec or a US cutter, or something that you load the material in and it cuts it with a blade, so it's not burning material away. No, I wouldn't bother bumping it up myself. Okay, so it really depends on the technique and what you're using to cut it as to whether you're going to bump it up or not. The other thing to look at is how it's digitized within your main design. This is really close to the edge. If it were over here, then yes, I would bump it up because I don't like things really close to the inner edge where risking it not being covered. Okay, but if it's middle or larger, then I don't bother unless I'm using the laser. Then I think about it twice. If it's right on the middle, I'll bump it up by the kerf for my particular laser. So you have to look that up. Because like I said, that's manufacturer dependent on how big that beam is that's burning away the material and how much material actually gets burnt. Does that help? Scoop KC? Scoop KC? Sorry. Okay, let's see what else. Where's my PowerPoint? There we are. All right. Can a Melco Bravo embroider letters like this? And that's this one right here. Okay, so that is typically done by hand as a chain stitch. Can you do that? You can do stuff similar, absolutely. So, but each letter is not there's not a digitized font built within DesignShop to do that. So what are your options? Well, it's kind of how do you want to do it? I'm going to close this one. I'm going to go to this one and just delete it. There. All right, so a few options. If I use my walk and then I use my decorative, down here you've got a chain stitch one. All right, so that will give you kind of a more triangle look, right? So you can use that one and sew it out, and you'll see what that does is it does a mock chain stitch like that. There's other things you can do. You can create your own. So this one, yeah, that's not the one I wanted, I don't think. Where's the other one? Chain like, this one. All right, so this is one that is intended for a smaller scale, but I can play with this. Oops, wrong way, 150. I can make it larger and get a thicker type line. So this is just a different shape I digitized to do like a thick bean stitch, if you will, that looks more hand done. So that's why it was kind of on a small scale. So you can do that. You can do V's. So all of these are like a decorative stitch that are intended to make the stitching look wider. So when you have those, whether you use the chain stitch or whatnot, then you just trace the lettering you want. So if I want an S, I'm going to draw an S by hand, but so it's not going to be the prettiest S, but it'll be an S nonetheless. I don't know what Creative Cloud is doing. I don't care. All right. So you can stitch it out, and then you can play again, go into the properties, and let's say you want the maybe that 50%, or maybe the length was right, but this one we want 50%. So you can stitch those out and see how close it comes to the look you're going for. But yeah, you can absolutely either use the built-in decoratives or create your own. I know I've pretty much on half the DesignShop talks talk about how to create a decorative, so I won't show that now unless you guys want to, but because I know many of you join every week, so I don't want to beat it to death. But yeah, you can create your own decoratives to get the look you want, and then it's just a matter of tracing the lettering you would like. Okay, looking at my questions. Do I have any? Good morning, everyone. Yeah, Christine and Al, Scott. All right, cool. I don't see any other questions typed in, so let's go see what else. I'm trying to arc the font only in the middle. I've done this before, I just can't remember how. So I'll show you what I would suggest for that. So that's going to be doing an envelope, if you will. All right, so E-N-V-E-L-O-P-E. Is that how you spell envelope? I don't know. We'll find out. All right. So that's a little big. Let's make it a little smaller just because I want to. Turn that off. All right. So you get whatever text you want. If you go right click, go into properties, double click, go into properties. It all takes you to the same spot. You'll see the line type right here is set to straight. Well, you can do perspective or envelope. If you've never played with these, play with them both. They do different things. They're very similar, but they skew the stitches a little bit different to either make it look like it's going around a corner and things like that. You know, the Star videos, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the movie, you know, where the text is going into the screen. You can get that sort of effect using the perspective. So, but anyway, here we go. So let's say you want to arch the center of the text. So I can add a point up here, and then I can hold the control key if I want it to be a perfect arc and drag it up. If you don't want it to be a perfect arc, that's cool too. Just drag it up by itself without holding the control key. And then you also have these guys where you can modify it. The Bezier handles that you can drag around to get the shape you're looking to do. And that works on the bottom as well. So you'll see there, the envelope puts a line on the top and the bottom, that blue line. So I can add points. Again, if I hold the control key and drag, it makes it a nice smooth arch. Without that, if I drag it around, it doesn't make it a nice smooth arch. And I've got all these handles that I can drag and do whatever I want with. Okay, so that's envelope. Now if I take the same thing, I do this all the time, I'll get a general shape I want, and then I'll go change it from envelope to perspective and see if I want that or if I want envelope. You know, it's what look are you going for is really what how it speaks. Okay, so that's how you would arch it. You can use this to fill in shapes. Let's see. All right, can you make an embossed effects with primer, or does it have to be digitized from scratch? You can. So the primer stitch, if I come in here, object, generate basting primer, go to primer stitch, add it. Okay, so now I got a primer stitch. I'm going to delete the other one, and I'm going to hide this text just so we can look at the shape. So I've got some random thing here that's not really embossed, right? So what do I do with that? Well, I can, first off, I'm going to change it to regular. So I've got stuff set up to do regular fill, but all that does is it changes it to a normal fill. All right, so I've got a basic fill, and now I want to do kind of an embossed look. Well, what are different ways to do that? Well, I can tell that to be a decorative fill instead. Okay, so rather than having that crosshatch, now I've got a decorative, and I can go through here and pick different decoratives to do that kind of embossed type look. You know, you can digitize your own decoratives. You can use the ones that are built in. Pebbles, that one's cute. So you can use all of those sorts of things. Judy, is that what you were asking? Can I change the design in the primer? Because that's what this is doing. Hopefully that's what you're asking. But yeah, you absolutely can do that. Now, if you have one you want to do yourself, all you would do is go create your own decorative and put it in there. Okay. All right. What else? Can you set up 2 different Acti-Feeds? Yes, you can. Give me one moment to pull up Chrome browser and log into my machine. I think I started over there, so I turned on a machine so I could actually show you this, since the shop, I've got all the machines off so I can have the door open. That computer. I'm logging into my remote desktop on that machine. So I can show you this question directly rather than me just pointing at my screen. Wrong computer. Okay, that one. All right, what else do we have? Can you arch a name that's already typed out? So the question on that, while I'm logging in here, the question I have on that is that going to be a computer that is, why do I keep on logging into the wrong computer? Oh, it's this one. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Apparently I can't double task as I think I can. Hit my Chrome closed before. There we go. All right, 1 moment to fix this so I can actually show you. I'm sorry, 1 moment. I'm almost there. All right. Almost. Yeah, this Chrome, I accidentally closed it right before we went live because I forgot I had this question. So give me, I'm almost set. C drive, where are you? There we are. C, designs. Okay, there we go. All right, so now that I did a lot of wasting time, sorry. Can you set up 2 Acti-Feeds for 1 project? All right, so let's look at that. So I got my machine here. Well, it doesn't fit in that hoop. I don't like that hoop. There we go. All right, so how do you set it up to have multiple thread feeds? First off, you go into the color sequence, and notice here you have settings by color. Let me make it bigger so that might help. Settings by color. If you turn on settings by color, what that allows you to do is for each color of your design, you can come down here and tell it what you're doing. So whether you want it to be at a speed 1000, or maybe you're going to be sewing with a Burmalana or a matte thread or excuse me, a specialty thread that needs to sew slower. So I can say, all right, for color 2, let's make that sew at 750, and my Acti-Feed lower limit, I want to baby that thread a little more. Maybe I want that sew at 7. Okay, so color 1 is still set this way. Color 2 is set to a slower speed. Color 3, maybe I want that one to sew at 1200 and whatever. So you can come through and for each color, you can set it. Notice here, you can also set it for that needle. So anytime it comes to that particular needle in the design, it will change to these settings. Maybe one thread, you don't want it to be on auto Acti-Feed, you want it to be standard. Anyway, you can set this all up, and now when you go to run it, every time it changes to that particular number, it's going to sew by those settings versus the ones that you have set up for the whole project. So that kind of overrides everything, and this is what it's going to do. Okay, so that's settings by color, and that is what you would use to set up different Acti-Feeds for one project. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Kelly asked while I was messing around, the primer stitch, would you use that under a design that on a really textured material? Yeah, so that's the beauty of a primer stitch, is when you've got textured materials, furs, things that I have always thought of in my head as eating the design. So like first time I ever made a Christmas stocking, it was really furry, and I sewed out a name, and then I pulled my topper off because it looked beautiful. I'm like, oh, that's so pretty. You know, I've got my name written out there and it looks cute. I pulled the water-soluble stabilizer off, and next thing you know, all the fur covered up all my pretty work. So that went from being, oh, that's pretty, to, why did I do that? So yeah, your primer stitch is going to hold down that texture so that your stitching doesn't get covered up. It doesn't become obscured by the material itself. So yes, I would actually recommend it for that. So to create those outlines, if you have version 11, super fast and easy. You take whatever shape you're trying to go around, and I'm going to make this one a little bit crazier just so you can see the primer stitch, right? So I can go Object, Generate Priming, Basting and Primer Stitch, make that be a primer. You can change, if you want it to be closer to the lettering or further away from the lettering, you can change that offset. Or you can just say, sure, whatever your default is. And I messed with properties on this file. I applied it to the whole project. So let's do that again. Ooh, let's go over here. I like that one. Object, Generate Primer, because that's one of the next questions. There you go. So now I have a primer stitch under those. Okay. We do have a, yeah, so Kelly, you have 11, so this is super easy. So there you go. Done and dusted. We got it. If you want the check marks, if you will, that crosshatch further apart, how do you do that? Again, select your design, object, create. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Okay. The question is, what if it's multiple colors and parts? That doesn't affect it at all. So let's go get a file. C. I'm going to go to my C drive, designs. Ooh, I got self-help train. Anyway, let's go get this. All right, multiple colors, shapes, whatever. Select the whole file. The whole design, generate priming. Good morning, Lisa. Change this to primer and say okay. And it'll go around that whole thing. The multiple parts and colors doesn't matter. It's going to do the border of everything that you've selected. Okay. Oh, what I was going to show you before I did that and got distracted by your question was, what if you want that crosshatch to be bigger? Well, that's going to be this density thing. So if you change that to 50, you'll see the crosshatch gets larger. Okay. All right, we did get you some further videos on adding a primer and basting stitches. So those are actually above your comments. We posted those for you. So if you want a whole lot of cool info about the primer and the basting feature, you can watch those videos as well. Okay, did I miss any other questions that on the live? Gabby, hi, good morning from Tucson. All right, we did all those. Cool. Back to my PowerPoint. Oh, can I art your name already typed out? If it was typed out in DesignShop, absolutely. So let's go look at that. So, editing. I should just leave all my spelling errors so I can go show you how to edit them, but that's all right. Okay, so I've got something typed out and now I want it to be an arch instead of a straight. That's okay. Go into the properties. Down here under line type, change it to arc, apply. There you go. You can change this manually or visually, if you will, by moving these handles around. All of those will let you to do it visually. Now, if you're a numbers type person and you want that to be a perfect 3-inch, cool. You can type it in on the properties. If you want it to be perfectly upright, again, cool. You can set that by number. What if you want that to be on the bottom? So an arc this way. Well, you can of course flip that. So I did that by clicking these two buttons. You can also do it by rotating it twice. So mirror, mirror on the wall. We'll flip it. But now that it's upside down, I don't want to read upside down text. I want it to be right side up, right? So what do you do there? Right here in the properties, you have counterclockwise. Poof. And I want to move that E over. There we go. On the G, or I can do auto kerning. So yeah, you can absolutely arc it yourself. Okay. Excuse me. Richard says you're having trouble sewing on high performance shirts. Okay, so high performance shirts, I think we have some good videos on those, or at least some articles on the FAQ that talk about best practices for that. performance shirts, in my experience, tend to be, they move, right? It's a thinner material, and it's hard to hoop it without overstretching. So that's the key you got to be careful of. Don't overstretch the daylights out of it to make sure it's holding still, because when you do, what happens? You undo it and it goes, and then you've got this puckered mess, right? Because it was overstretched when sewing. I think in the article it talks about and this is how I personally do it, which is, I'm happy it matches the article. Anyway, I use 2 layers of no-show mesh or cut performance, and it's a thinner weight stabilizer. Why do you want a thin stabilizer? Performance shirts, again, are lightweight, so if you put really heavy backing on it, you can sometimes get that badge effect where you see the stabilizer through it, and not all people like that look. I'll be honest, every time I go into the uniform shop, it makes me giggle, because all of the performance shirts at the uniform shop locally, that's what they do. They just put really heavy stabilizer on it, and you get what you get. So you see the big patch of material that most of the people don't trim very close, so it just makes me giggle. But anyway, we did get you links to the videos, so that would be one. The other thing is make sure the digitizing is appropriate. If you have super heavy densities and things like that, you're going to be hammering it to death and putting too many stitches for the material for the design. Now, so what I like to do is take my 2 layers of stabilizer, use a spray adhesive. I like using either the K100 or the OTIF 505. It really doesn't matter. Get a spray adhesive. Now, before you hoop it, I usually spray a layer of the stabilizer, take my other stabilizer and stick it to it. So now I got a sandwich. And then I take my stabilizer, spray it, and stick it to the back of the shirt while the shirt's not hooped. So that way I can smooth it out nice and make sure it's all holding still to my stabilizer. All right, and it can't move because I've stuck it to it. So after you do that, then you hoop it and sew it using good digitizing practices. Some of the performance wear does have a very distinct texture or ribbing to it, which can sometimes make the edges of your designs look weird. Using a topper or making sure you have a good underlay, like an edge walk and things like that, help make that all go away. So I'll tend to use a topper on those sorts of things to make sure it sews nice and clean. And short of that, hoop and go. That would be my suggestion. Check out the links we got for you on the videos on performance wear. See if those help. Let us know. Hopefully those little tips help some. All right. Let's see. What else do we have? Any others typed in? Let me make sure I didn't miss any. Okay. How to turn a vector into an embroidery design. Okay. Oh, let me answer this one real quick. I'm interested in buying the Bravo X. Do I need to upgrade on the DesignShop software? Can I use what I currently have? You can, yeah, if you're happy with what you have, you can use that. If you want to do more, you can use buying a new machine as a way to upgrade. That's entirely up to you. Whatever you currently have will still work. Okay, so it's not going to affect anything. It's still a digitizing software, and it's still going to give you files that you can load into the machine and sew. So there's no reason to upgrade. It's always, talk to the sales guy, see if they have any options for upgrades and if it makes sense within your budget and those sorts of things. But do you have to? Absolutely not. But if you don't have version 11, I love the features. So anyway. Oh my gosh. Excuse me. All right. How to turn a vector into an embroidery design. So I'm going to do a new file. Let me close files. I keep on doing new. We don't need this many. I still have to do that one, so I'm going to leave it open. Is that all I have open? Yeah. Okay, so new file, vector. Let's go open a vector. Graphics, a vector. I like my coffee cup. All right, so we got a vector. A bunch of ways you can do this. So you can select your vector and just go straight to convert. All right, and that's all converted. You can take each element of the vector and then work with it. because that's the wireframe. So the only difference between a fill and a wire and a complex fill with thread and a wireframe vector is you haven't provided any stitch information to it. So I can select these vectors and go, okay, I want the stitch direction. And then maybe you want to adjust its start and stop. I want the start there and the stop there. Okay, so you can do it by adding some stitch directions. You can do it one at a time by selecting each element individually. That way, if you need to make adjustments, you can do those. Let's say that one, it added that hole and I don't want the hole. You can delete the hole, or why did it put the hole there to begin with? Because notice the shape didn't have a hole. It's because right here there's this flatten button selected. So if I uncheck that, now it will do it without a hole. Okay, so, or maybe this guy, I didn't like the straight stitch direction. Okay, so let's delete it. And let's hold this guy down and go to a curve. Oops, you got to select the element first. So select the element, go to a curve, insert curve stitch direction. Now I can do a curve stitch direction. Give it a little more shape. Okay, so all of that is just taking your vector wireframe and adding stitch directions to it. Trying to think another way. Oh, I can select this and I can go to this guy and I can step through it. And we have Scott's done some really good videos on the this graphic conversion assistant, but basically it'll walk you through if you step through, or I guess I could just say auto convert, which is the same thing as that convert button I did earlier. And it'll convert it, or you can step through it and for each element tell it the order you want it to sew, any stitch direction changes, you know, all of that sort of thing you can do. Okay. Let's see. I have a cat's face with a fill, but parts of the fill has shading on two colors. One will be darker than the other. That's cool. Okay, so if you gotta, let's say I want to fill on a fill. So I just copied and pasted that. Were you asking how to do it, or am I just assuming? So let's say I want shading to be not that full shape, right? So I can either just move this wireframe around. Why did I start with this one? I actually started with it to keep the stitch direction the same. Do I have to? No. I can draw my own. I just did this because I was being lazy, if I'm honest. All right. Okay, let's say we want that ugly shape to be our shading. Okay. Now I don't want a 3.8 density fill on top of another 3.8 density fill. That's no good. But I can take this guy and go change its density to something like that with getting rid of all this underlay because we don't need any of that. It's going on top of it. And then let's say, oh, my start and stop. See, it's doing something weird in there. That's because of the stop. So I can move my stop point over here. These little edges, if I don't like those little pointy things, I can come in here and change that to trapunto. It'll make it more square, but then it also makes this a little more rigid where you can see it. It's what look are you going for? If you want it to be a more varied, like not so even, so you want a little bit more variables on there, you can come in and go to effects, tell it to be a custom density. And I always like to do auto apply so I can see it. So if you want it darker at the top, or let's say at the bottom, or if you want to do this and flip it, make it darker in the middle. You said it's cat. Or maybe you want to do a wave look where you've got different densities throughout it. So you can play. I always like turning on the auto so I can move these dots around or add dots and see what it does to the design real time. Okay, so you can do all this until you get the shading you want. I'll be honest, does blue on red look good? No. I usually do this myself with a really obscene color that is not what my final color is going to be, so that when I go change it to the color I actually want, I'm not sitting there squinting trying to see it. So what's a color that's near that red that might actually work? That'll do. That one. That one. I want that one. Okay. So yeah, you can do shading like that. The other thing with shading is stitch length. If you're trying to get it to kind of blend in more, if this one here has a stitch length of 40, then if I shorten that stitch length, it's going to bury the stitches a little bit more into it to kind of force it to look a little more blended. So that's just another little trick. If you want it to sit on top of it, you'd make the stitches a little longer. So if you don't want it sinking in as much, you would want to go a little bit bigger. So that's just another trick. Okay, let's see. Did that help any? Another thing you could always try, since you said it was an animal, would be this random effect. That'll kind of make it look more random along the edge, and you can change that so it's more or less random. So that's along this edge, and that's generally better without the trapunto, honestly. Okay, gets rid of the hard lines and things like that. Okay. All right, what other questions do we have? Okay, so we did that. We did that. What settings do you use to blend fill and satin stitches like in this attached picture? Okay, so that's the one I keep on leaving up because I had up. No split. Okay, so I'm going to go type it in, change that to the same font, Astra, and make it bigger. And let's zoom in on it so we can actually see what's going on. So notice this one has areas of satin, areas of fill, and it's kind of it's a random fill, right? It's not kind of organized in a clean manner. So why is that, number one? So why is it doing that? So if you go into the properties, when it switches from satin to fill is being driven by this number right here. Okay? Anything bigger than that number, and what I mean, anything bigger than that number, if I measure the stitch length from one side to the other, so that's a stitch length right there of that one stitch, that's 41 points. That is smaller than 80, so it's a satin stitch. By the time I get over here, if I measure across that, that's 85 points. So it's bigger, therefore it converted it over into a fill. Okay, and it is a random fill. So if you want to adjust what the fill sections look like, you might not want a random. You might want to say random offset, or, you know, play with these, or say no pattern. So that's one option. Or you can come over to standard and then you can set it by using these things here. So the look that you're going for, what I would suggest is using a 6 partition, 501, 501, and 90. And that will give you that kind of clean center blend, if you will, through the satin stitch and make it look more like just a split satin, if you. So that's what I would suggest, and that's just a little formula there. Partition 6, and then 501, 501. If you set the angle on 90, if you leave it at the 45, notice it's kind of banded looking. Maybe that's the look you want. So there you go. Okay, so that's what I would suggest for that. Richard says, oh, so on the blending and shading, we did get you some links posted there. Now Richard says, going back to the high performance shirts. Okay, cool. Let me know what question you have and I'll jump back to it. All right. While I'm waiting on your question, I'm going to keep going. Okay, so we did that. How do you turn the background in OS to be darker colored, just like DesignShop? Because white on white is hard to see. You're right, white on white is hard to see. So let's see if I can figure that out. I've done it before. How? Oop. Had to do with backing to color 0. I don't, oh, there we go. I don't do it that often, so I forgot. Let's see. Oh, that's right. I knew it was setting the backing up to 0. Okay. So go to your color sequence. There's an article here. So right click on any of these. Go down to 0 and choose a color. And now my background is that color. Okay, so again, click on your color sequence. So right click on a color, go down to 0 and choose whatever color it is you want. So I'm going to put it back to white because it's going to annoy me on Monday when I turn the machines back on. But that's all there is to it. You back this down to 0, go choose whatever color you'd like. If you want an RBG color, you can come down rather than a thread color and go System RGB and go choose one of these guys. See? Okay, we did get an article there for you. Let me go put it back. It's going to make me crazy. Okay. All right, Richard, I still don't see your question, but let me know and I'll jump on it for you. Okay, so those were the questions that were typed in ahead of time. Scrolling through the comments to make sure I didn't jump something. A rocket launched. Woohoo. Oh, why does it keep on changing my monitor? That's really annoying. Okay, going back to the high performance shirts. Gaps in the fill, no matter 4 or 3/5 or 3. Okay, are you using a topper and do you have a sufficient underlay? So with high, I think what you're saying is you're seeing material underneath between your stitches. Okay, so that can be driven by a few things. I would look at, first off, are you using appropriate underlay? Are you using a topper? So if you put a topper down, let's say, let me go over to DesignShop. Okay, so we're going to pretend I'm in a box. Okay, we're going to pretend for that rectangle is all I want to sew on a performance shirt. Whatever. All right, so what I think you're saying is when you sew it out, it's looking more like this, where you see gaps between the sewing, right? You're seeing the fabric underneath there, regardless of what your density is set at. So things to pay attention to on that, making sure you have a good underlay. If you have no underlay, you're not giving a foundation of thread for the stitches to sit on top of. For large fill areas, having an open kind of fill is helpful. The other thing to do for that is make sure you have a topper first, so that when your underlay goes down, now it's even resting on something. Okay, so having a really good underlay and a topper and sew it down. You know, I would personally do around 3/7. That's what I like. But 3/7 to 4 is usually plenty. You start going super low, it gets so heavy, particularly on performance wear. That's no good. So making sure you have a good underlay. I usually use auto. Why? If I turn this off, because I like that crosshatch. Do you need that crosshatch? Probably not, but I really like it. It sews so nicely. The edges, if the edges are giving you issues, you can change that border margin to something a little bit smaller. I wouldn't personally recommend going any lower than 5. So you could turn that off and make the border margin. You'll see what it does. Notice this, how close this gets to that. when I change this, it gets closer to the edge of the wireframe. Okay, so putting a topper down, putting that down, and then sewing is usually plenty enough to have it all sewn. Okay, making sure your Acti-Feed's not too tight. That's another thing to look at. So on the machine side, if it's super tight, it's going to pull down really tight into the material. So making sure you're not over sinking it down to exacerbate the material coming up through. That's also another thing to look at, just from a, on your machine side. Okay. So that's what I would check for, that is making sure you have good underlay, you have a topper, and your Acti-Feed isn't too low. All right. Any other questions before we call it a day? And I go get some more cough syrup. Excuse me. Anything else? Wait a few seconds and see. Yeah, I don't see any others. All right, y'all. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'll be back next week. See what questions you might have. You'll notice on social media, I'll tend to post this here picture along with hey, any questions? It's posted from my personal page, so you'll see it as my name. If you have any questions, type them in there. I'll gather them up and see what we can talk about next week. Next week, I am going to aim for Thursday, unless my kids decide to have a meltdown again. So, other than that, you guys have a fantastic week. Hopefully my voice sounds better next week. All right. Have a great weekend, and I will be back next time. Bye, everyone.